On February 18th, the airfield at Cleveland, Tennessee was soaked with heavy rains, and the day was disagreeable for departure. It was decided to fly the planes unloaded to level field at Chattanooga and begin the journey from there. Time passed swiftly as the planes were washed, refueled, loaded, and thoroughly checked. No time could be lost, for the fleet must be on its way soon in order to reach its first destination, Panama City, Florida, on scheduled time for the first meeting. Given to assemble in formation so the general overseer could give final instructions and pray for a successful trip and a safe return. This parting will linger long in the minds of those present. Tears of joy and sorrow mingled as goodbyes were said to family and friends. Passengers of the fleet boarded the planes and took to the air. It was a beautiful sight as the fleet winged its way into a flying cross above the airport and departed. The fleet had its first landing in Panama City, and from thence to Ocurre, Florida. Miami was the next hop. While here, the fleet was delayed for half a day waiting for papers from the government. A hurried lunch was enjoyed by everyone. During this day, Brother E.H. Griffith was upon a chaplain, and a good service was conducted at the airport. From Miami, the fleet flew to Key West, and assembling in the Flying Cross, headed out across the shark-infested waters toward Havana, Cuba. It was a glorious adventure, and God was praised mightily for allowing these the privilege to be the human mortals living in the day when the prophecies of Isaiah were being fulfilled. They were much impressed by the Spirit of God. Heavy clouds were hanging between them and Cuba, and it looked as though it would rain any minute. But the fleet did not turn back. Operations Officer H.L. Moore, piloting the lead plane, became more anxious as the minutes passed. His eyes were constantly searching the horizon for Cuba. His compass told him that he was right on course. The intercom radios between the planes were being used frequently. The pilots wanted to know if each was well and maintaining formation. Finally, the island of Cuba loomed into sight. The overseer of Cuba, Brother Antonio Ledesma Soto, and some of his zealous workers were on hands to greet the arrival of the fleet. Next morning, we arose early and headed for the airfield. A group of Cuban VLBs were selected to be flight messengers for the Flying Cross air salute over Havana, and they were greatly thrilled over having a part in the program. This was a remarkable episode of the trip. And as these pilots took to the air in this great demonstration, the good Spirit of God could be felt among them. Burst of rays of gold and red over the Capitol building this fair morning. Everything promised a glorious day as they traveled by bus to the airport. Spirits were lifted in spite of a delay in having papers checked so they could return to Cuba again without trouble. The flight from Havana to Camagüey, Cuba, a distance of about 300 miles, was uneventful. There was a short stop for refueling and checking out with the customs officials. The fleet then moved out of the airfield at Camagüey with the intention of making its next stop at Kingston, Jamaica. Leaving Cuba behind, the fleet was soon out over the deep blue sea again. When they were about 30 miles from land and 70 or 80 miles yet to go for the next stop, a large cloud bank towering about 8,000 feet arose ahead of them. The lead plane turned to the left to gain altitude and to allow the slower planes a chance to catch up. By the time he reached the necessary altitude, other planes were lost to view. Perhaps they had gone through the clouds. The two planes that went through the cloud bank together searched in vain for the others. They tried to radio that they were going directly to Montego Bay, but the message was never received. Because of motor trouble, Brother Moore decided it best to turn back to the mainland of Cuba. 5 other planes followed suit, and they landed in Ocurre, where they met Mr. Lobo, who directed them to Pilan, and to his mechanic, who repaired the planes. The 2 planes that went through the cloud bank together landed at Montego Bay, where another plane came in alone. They had lost sight of the fleet and thought they were the only ones who were lost. The pilots searched the skies for the other 6 missing planes. The flying missionaries with the 6 planes at Pilan were awakened next morning by U.S. search planes. The government pilot informed them that the world thought they were lost and that the other planes had landed safely at Montego Bay. After having been detained by the Cuban Army, the officer in charge soon told them they were free to go. When members of the fleet looked out over the blue waters, they had noticed 3 U.S. battleships that had stayed with them until they were clear. It was a happy reunion at Montego Bay. When the White Angel fleet regrouped, tears of joy were shed as happy hearts were melted in love and thanksgiving to God. The fleet next flew to Kingston, Jamaica, where they received a warm welcome by the church people and the officials of the island. Brother R.C. Smith, island overseer, stated frankly that the greatest ship ever brought to Jamaica was fellowship. Approaching the building for the first service, members of the fleet found trucks unloading and the church and streets filled to capacity with hungry souls waiting for the gospel of Christ. For the last service, where approximately 3,000 people were gathered, the flying missionaries were bid Godspeed. The prophecy of Isaiah lives in Jamaica today. Surely the isles shall wait for me. Flying along the coastline of Haiti, there could be seen many huts where the natives lived, scattered along the countrysides. Brother J. Vital Hearn, overseer of Haiti, certainly has done a wonderful work in the islands. Here, as in all the other islands, the natives were overjoyed with the visit. Two hours later, the White Angel fleet rolled down the runway at Ciudad Trujillo, Dominican Republic. Overseer Brother J.H. Ledoux and his good people greeted the members of the White Angel fleet. Again time slipped by, and all too soon they were compelled to leave the Dominican Republic. Arising early next morning, they said goodbye to Camagüey and flew to Puerto Padre, where Brother Kent was presented the key of flowers as a symbol of the key to the city. Having refueled at Camagüey, they glided through the air once again without worry, and just 2.5 hours later, they landed at Havana, the last stop in the islands. From thence, the fleet moved to Miami, then to Nassau, Bahamas, where they were met and greeted by General Overseer M.A. Tomlinson and other delegates to the Bahamas Annual Colonial Convention. The convention was a real blessing to everyone present, and this was another successful trip for Christ and his church. When the convention was over, the White Angel fleet returned to Miami with the assurance that this had truly been a rendezvous with prophecy.